Samtito Jayodiret, Nishta Presho Badreshu, Nityam Bhagata Sevaya, Bhagavati Utama Shuki, Bhaktir Bhavati Naistaki, Nigamalka Padurgaritam Param Shukam Karamina Dravi Samitam, Vibata Bhagatam Rashamariam, Mahora Hora Shikabuvi Bhavakaham, Krishna Swadamapagate Dharmavyanahi Saha, Karunastadvi Shamisha Paranako Dunoditaham. Pramapiyada Vishuta Vishwatam Vibhu Samyapirayana Vidam Viruksharam Prakyahito Maharajitatmanam Sanklesha Nirvana Musanti Nanyatam. Hey Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dinu Bandhu Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radhakanta Namostute Jayatam Saruto Pango Mama Manir Madhyargati Matsavasha Parambo Jaradhan Madan Mohanam Sriman Rasarasaram Vamsi Vara Karsan Benesh Nirpaga Gopinata Sriyasiraham Divyad Vrindaranya Kalpadramada Srimad Radhagara Shima Shanishto Shri Radha Shila Govinda Deva Prestalavihi Sevyamanu Shmanami Namo Brahmanya Devaya Go Brahmanya Taya Cha Jagaditaya Krishnaya Govindaya Namo Namaha Mangalam Bhagavan Vishnu Mangalam Gudadrija Mangalam Paridikaksho Mangalayatano Hari Om Narayanaya Vidmahi Vasudevaya Dhimahi Tano Vishnu Prachodayate Om Mahadevi Cha Vidmahi Vishnu Padni Dhimahi Tano Lakshmi Prachodayate Mahalakshmi Namastubhyam Namastubhyam Saraswati Hari Priya Namastubhyam Namastubhyam Deyadide Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vishavanasute Devi Pranamani Hari Priya Namo Vishnu Paraya Krishna Pistaya Bhutade Shrimati Bhakti Vedanta Swami Tinamane Namaste Sarasati Devi Gauravani Pachari Nirvishesa Sunivadi Paskita Desadarine Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasari Gaur Bhakta Vindam Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Good morning, everybody, both on Facebook as well as on Zoom. Yesterday we concluded with the example that the body, ourselves, seems to be fairly simple, fairly straightforward, very consistent, fairly stable. But the more that you look at the body minutely, the more that you analyze it, the anatomy of it, the physiology of it, the chemistry of it, the physics of it, you realize that on every level, in fact, the more minute the level is, the more complicated it is. There are incredibly widespread and incredibly complex operations going on the physical level, the chemical level, the psychological level. There's nothing simple about this body whatsoever. You may just think, oh, that's true. I see him every day, true in, true out, true in the morning, true in the evening, true in the evening. But if you look at what's going on in the body, it is infinitely complicated. And the more that you're able to microscope in, the more complicated it becomes. A few decades ago, scientists thought that they could reduce all the phenomenon of life, mysteries of life, into a formula that you could put on a T-shirt that would explain everything. It was called reductionism. But then as they got more and more sophisticated instrumentation and technology, they were able to computerize, draw images. They You don't hear anyone talk about reductionism anymore. Far from it. You get quantum mechanics, quantum physics, and it's more fluid than it is fixed. It's more liquid than it is solid matter. Everything is more a function of consciousness than it is of set, ponderous laws of material nature. There's so many things going on so many levels. And it's important to note that this is all going on without God's personal attention. His energies are Swabhavika Balagana Kriya. His energies are complete. They know what to do. They know what to do. You send a highly trained soldier out with a platoon or with a regiment, or a division, and because he's been to West Point, he's studied every single scenario. He's got your detailed and explicit orders. He's got topography. He's got the train. He knows what to do. You can turn your attention to other business, knowing that's taken care of. So Krishna has energies, earth, air, fire, water, ether, mind, intelligence, false ego. These are what comprise this material world, and each and every one of them knows what to do. They know how to interact, they know how to expand, they know how to retract, they know how to change, transform as the seasons change. None of that requires the personal attention of the Lord. All of that is bundled up into something which is semi-fancifully called the Virat Purusha. The Virat Purusha is an imaginative form of this material world in the shape of a material manifestation of God. The Virata Rupa is God for materialists. Those people who want to understand how great God is perceived as the universal form, the body of the universal creation. The upper planets are his shoulders, the middle planets are his belly, the lower planets are his legs and his feet, the forest or the hairs on his bed, the hairs on his head. It's a huge universal form. And yet, directing or remotely causing all of the various goings on in that universal form, which are complicated beyond imagination, is the thread, the essence, the source of the Virata Rupa is Krishna. And Krishna himself doesn't, as I said, have to pay any attention to what's going on. His attention is directed towards his devotees in Goloka Vrindavan. At one and the same time, he is the transcendental Adhikar in the spiritual world. He's the cynosure of everybody's attention. He's the jewel of all jewels, Bhushanam Bhushanagaram. And at the same time, that same Krishna who is playing as the son of Mother Yashoda and Nanda Maharaj is the thread which is keeping everything together in this material world. Sutra Mana Gana Iva. You have a pearl necklace. And what everybody notices are the pearls. Beautiful woman has a strand of pearls around her thin, elegant neck, and she's got a beautiful evening dress. So everybody knows those pearls are real. And they talk about the pearls, they'll whisper, oh, isn't she gorgeous? Or I wonder how much those pearls cost. Nobody talks about the thread that holds the pearls together. It's invisible, it's unseen, it's not discussed. Nobody speculates on is it made of nylon? Is it made of fishing rope? Is it a zip tie? Is it whatever? Nobody even bothers about the thread. But without the thread, there's no necklace. Everybody's attracted by the necklace, but what's keeping it together, which is unseen, and actually more important, more essential, is the actual thread. So the attractive pearls of this world, everything that we go ooh and ah over, nowadays, travel with airlines and cruise ships. Troy, our good friend Troy, comes back from Vietnam, and I said, "What's your next trip?" And he said, "Oh, his mother bought the family, the kids, all a cruise to the Caribbean. They're going, I think, next month or something. There's these huge cruise ships. Where was I? I was somewhere recently where we drove Miami. Yeah, we drove around Miami in my rental car. Came to a place where there was three or four of these huge cruise ships. They were like cities. So we travel all over. We pick up a vacation package. We pick up a cruise. We go to a resort in Cancun. um, we talk about and we travel to and we oogle and ooh it all the attractive pearls of this world. But behind all of them, the essential part of it is Krishna, who is he's the thread behind this material world. He's the backbone. In the sixth canto of the Bhagavatam, after the Yamadutas were frustrated, they had been commissioned by Yamaraj to go and drag Ajamil off for punishment. As you know, Ajamil was very sinful, but he chanted the name of Narayan at the last stage of his life. And as a result of his calling out in a helpless mood, the Narayana Dutas came intervened, frustrated the Yamadutas. They brought Ajamil back into his body and gave him 2 more years of life. Yamadutas were a little confused by this because their idea was that Yama, their lord, was God, and there was no higher authority than him. Imagine their surprise when these effulgent beings came from above and intervened and stopped them from taking Ajamil away. And not only that, told him that by chanting the name of Narayan one time, Ajamil had freed himself of more sins than he could commit. They were astounded. Who has the power? By whose name? Simply by chanting somebody's name, one is free of legions and legions of sinful acts. So they went back to Yamaraj in somewhat of a rebellious, mutinous mood. They'd always followed him unquestionably and they accepted his authority. Um, absolutely. But now his authority had been questioned by these effulgent beings that they'd interacted with. And Yamaraj said, yeah, I never told you I was God, and you were never right to assume I was God. I'm God over those who are miscreants. As far as the miscreants and the sinful are concerned, my word is law. Everything I say is enacted. But the whole game changes when even a sinful person chants the names of the Lord at the time of leaving his body, even though what Ajamil did was not premeditated. He didn't practice to do it. He was, in a sense, lucky that his youngest son happened to have been named by a name of God. He didn't intentionally chant the name of God in the same way that great relay saints and sages do, but he didn't do it with any offenses either. He helplessly cried out the name of God at the time the Yamadutas were approaching him. So in that situation, when one crosses over in a second from being impious and sinful to being purified, then I'm no longer the last authority on the word. The name, I have a master, his name is Vishnu, who is a portion of a portion of a portion of a portion of Krishna, who tends the cows in Goloka Vrindavan. And ultimately, if you want to trace it back, Krishna in his expanded forms is Vishnu, and the Paramatma, he is or he are the threads. He are the threads which put this world together. Joshua, our good friend whose birthday we celebrated last Friday, told me a few years ago that one of his favorite hobbies is quilting. I know, and there's a lot of quilting that goes on in Utah. It's a favorite activity, and Josh is a quilter. So we got to talking, and I said, "Have you ever done a Krishna quilt?" I don't remember what he said. I'd rather think he hadn't. So he came by, so thoughtful, so kind, a few weeks later with a whole big enough for a big double bed quilt. It's yellow and blue with Krishna spelled on it. It's a Krishna quilt. And I now have that quilt on my bed. I sleep under the shelter of Krishna every night in my room. A big Krishna emblazoned on the outside of my quilt. Keeps me warm, keeps me protected. So that quilt is made up of threads. Some of the threads go horizontally, some of them go vertically and intertwine. And some of them are dyed blue, navy blue, and some of them are dyed yellow, which incidentally is my favorite combination of colors for doing all my slideshows as well. Navy blue and bright yellow, I think, is no more attractive couple of colors. So imagine Krishna as the thread which goes horizontally and vertically, and which is the backbone, which is the source for this material world. You may have all kinds of different quilts. You have different rugs, different blankets, different pillowcases, different tapestries, different wall hangings, all kinds of different dyes and colors and arrangements and patterns on them. But every one of them has one thing in common. They are what they are. They manifest because of the crisscrossing of the horizontal and vertical threads. Krishna says, that I am. Sutre mana ganaiva. that I am. And Yamaraj also informs his servants that he are not, I don't know how you say this, the threads which pervade and support everything in this material world. That he defers to Krishna, who expands himself into various Vishnu incarnations and telescopes out, as it were, and supports everything, all the functions of this material world. However, Krishna is parampara, parampara, unseen, composed of the internal spiritual energy, having nothing material about him. Lord Vishnu pervades and supports the entire material world, like threads support or compose a quilt or a blanket. And at the same time, Vishnu has nothing to do with this material world. He's completely transcendental. He's comprised of the internal energy. However, Krishna is transcendental to the transcendentalist. Krishna is transcendental to Vishnu in terms of his flute playing, in terms of his exceeding beauty, in terms of his sweetness, uh, in terms of his abode, Goloka Vrindavan, in terms of his associates. He has the advantage over Vishnu. There are 64 qualities which adhere to Krishna, and there are only 60 qualities which adhere to Vishnu. Bottom line, Vishnu is more imperial, more monarchical. There's more formality, there's more protocol, there's a little more stiffness. Vishnu, that when Krishna appears in Dwarka, he's Vishnu, and it's palatial. There's a lot of etiquette, there's a lot of pomp and ceremony. That's Vishnu. But Krishna has none of that. He's Vishnu. He's Krishna is Vishnu, or Krishna is God with his hair down. So he is transcendental even to the transcendentalists. Lord Chaitanya quoted the Atmarama Bose, Atmanamastamuni Nugrantika Korvanti Apiti Itam Bhuta Ganahari. Even great transcendentalists, and even what to speak of conditioned souls who are liberated by virtue of practicing devotional service, even the incarnations of the Lord, like Kurma, Varaha, Matsya, Narasringa. What to speak of the liberated transcendentalists who are in the category of ordinary conditioned souls, even avatars, even Purusha avatars, like Kurma, like the tortoise avatar, the lion avatar, the boar avatar. Even they cannot understand Krishna's pastimes in Vrindavan. They defy mental comprehension. Therefore, we find this verse in the third canto, second chapter, 12th verse of the Srimad Bhagavatam. Yanmartu Lila Payakam Shoyogam Maya Balam Daishiram Gritam. Yanmartu Lila Payakam. Even amongst those who are meant for death in this material world, there are many who are marked for death. We're all marked for death, but among those who are marked for death, there are some that achieve extraordinary opulence. Bill Gates and Elon Musk and Mark Juergensmeyer. By their previous activities and by the grace of God, they've achieved extraordinary opulence and power. So they cannot but be attracted to the super excellent, supernatural opulence of power of Krishna. Were they to encounter the stories and pastimes of Krishna, they would have to be appreciative that here is someone much more powerful, much more opulent, even than we are. They're like kings. They're almost like planetary controllers. And yet Krishna is so far beyond them, they have to have some jaw-dropping, appreciative feelings towards Krishna. So even materialists, they can appreciate that I'm rich, but God is richer. Okay. And then we go to those who are already liberated, who are beyond material possessions, influence, and power, and they worship Krishna because of the um, influence that he exerts. He's in the heart of every living entity. He knows what we're thinking before we think it. He knows all the complex, he knows, and he's behind all the complexities that are going on at every moment in each and every one of our bodies. He's the Virata Rupa. He's the universal form, which also is the basis and support for all the different phenomena in this material world. But then beyond that, beyond the rich people of this material world who appreciate Krishna, beyond the uh, the transcendentalists who have given up all material aspirations and who appreciate that Krishna's qualities are transcendental. There is the internal energy. There are the activities of the internal energy. There are the eternally liberated inhabitants of the spiritual world of Vaikuntha. And even for the inhabitants of Vaikuntha, just like in the Krishna pastimes, the queens of Dwarka, they couldn't really understand the gopis of Vrindavan. They were unlimitedly curious. They never tired of hearing Krishna or Rohini talk about the pastimes of Vrindavan, but they were always at a loss as to understand what was so attractive about this simple village that Krishna would call out the names of the Brijvasis in the middle of the night in his sleep, and that he always seemed to be yearning to go back to them. They were, even the liberated souls who lived with Krishna in Dwarka, his queens, who were duly married to him, couldn't quite figure out what was the special attraction of Vrindavan and the simple inhabitants of Vrindavan. So this means that not only for materialists and not only for the avatars of God who are clothed in formality and protocol, but even for the female associates of the Lord, such as exist in the Vaikuntha planets and the Dwarka fort, they also recognize that the pastimes which Krishna performs with the gopis and with the cows in Vrindavan are the super excellent. They are beyond even the transcendental activities of the Lord in this material world. And so there's nothing Bhishmapanam, Yanmarta Lila Paikam Shoyagam Maya Balam. Even many of the activities of the internal energy are at a loss to understand the special sweet pastimes of Krishna in Vrindavan, Bhishmapanam. These pastimes are wonderful, even to the already wonderful inhabitants of the spiritual world. And therefore, Krishna, over and above and beyond Vishnu or Shiva or any other plenary portion, Krishna and Krishna only is called the Param Param Bhushana Bhushanagara. He's called the ornament of all ornaments. You'll recall how during the time when Krishna was exhibiting his pastimes on the planet, the sons of the Brahmin, sons of a Brahmin died. I think it was six sons of a Brahmin died in infancy, which was unheard of in those times. In those days, everything was adjusted nicely. Everything was as it should be. And children never expired before their parents. It never happened. It would be the parents who would live a long, full life. Then they would expire and their children would uh, do their funeral ceremonies for them. And then they would live, everybody lived a long, full life. Nobody's life was cut short. And so when these Brahmins, not one or two, but six sons, he blamed the king. He went outside the palace and he shook his fist and he did a protest. Maybe he pitched a tent. Maybe he had an encampment. We don't know the details. But he blamed the leadership for the deaths of his son. He said, this is so unheard of. It's so unusual that some of the leaders must be not what they seem to be. They must be crooked. And as a citizen, I'm getting the reactions from their nefarious activities. These are kinds of things that insults that he was hurling at Arjuna. And so Krishna always rushes to protect the reputation of his devotees. And therefore, after Arjuna exhausted his resources, Arjuna, in an effort to find the sons, he went to the abode of Yama. He went to various places within this material world and came up empty. Nobody knew where the sons had been. That means the sons had been taken by Lord Vishnu himself. Sons had been taken to a transcendental place to which Arjuna had no access. So Krishna, always wanting to help out his devotees, invited Arjuna to mount his chariot, and they rose up and they pierced beyond the covering of this particular material universe and eventually made their way to the abode of Lord Vishnu himself. Um, uh, this would be Garbhodakshay Vishnu, I believe. And Vishnu, true enough, he admitted that he'd stolen the sons of the Brahma because he wanted a pretext that Krishna would come to retrieve them on behalf of his devotee so that Lord Narayan, Lord Vishnu, would be able to see the beautiful form of Krishna. There you have it. That, that all the incarnations of God are beautiful, but Krishna is Paraparam. He's the most beautiful of the beautiful. He's transcendental, even to the transcendentalist. He's the ornament of all ornaments. And although he's playing his flute and performing pastimes in the rural area of Vrindavan, Divyad Vrindaranya Kalpadrumada Srimad Ratnagara Shri Radha Shilagova Prasalabi Sevaman. Devotees throughout the ages and throughout the material world and even throughout the regal Vaikuntha world, where the opulent palaces of Narayan exist, they are all looking up. None of them think that they've arrived at the ultimate destination, but they realize that beyond even the transcendental world of Vaikuntha, there is a special playful world, a special laid back, special relaxed world where Krishna sports with his devotees. You might have heard me talk before about my one visit to Versailles, the famous palace of Louis XIV in outside of Paris. I forget how many men it took, how many thousands of men it took, how many years, something like 30 years, thousands and thousands of artisans to build this palace. And there's good reason behind building a palace. You might think that some of these palaces that kings built are obscene, but there's good reason. There's a practical reason to build a palace, and that is that when emissaries from foreign neighboring countries come and see you, you put on such a display of invincibility and opulence that they don't even think about attacking you. If they were to perceive weakness in you, then they would attack you, and that would create chaos in your kingdom, misery for your citizens. So, in one sense, it's part of the king's duty to have a big palace and have a lot of ceremony and pomp, because that is a less expensive way than fighting a war. In a kind of similar way of reasoning, we are sending arms to Ukraine and the reasoning in some quarters that we're sending arms to Ukraine, billions of dollars of arms to Ukraine, is that it's actually cheap, because if Russia is allowed to have their way and topple one country after another, it won't be too long before they'll be on our shores as well. And then knocking at our door, there'll be much greater expense. There'll be much more disruption, more destruction. We will, in a sense, be fighting for our very existence, just like Ukraine is. So it's better to fund Ukraine and let them fight our battle. That's the reasoning. Similarly, radical Muslimism, has stated that they would like to topple pretty much all of Western civilization. And so the reasoning behind sending support to Israel is they're fighting to keep what is it called? To keep the wolves from the door. Those are the reasoning. I'm not making any political statements myself, but these are the reasoning that it's actually a cheap way to avoid a lot greater calamity, a lot closer to home. And so in the same way, um, in the same way, the the point is made here in connection with Krishna. Krishna has his universal form. He showed it to Arjuna in the 11th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita. Arjuna was aghast. Arjuna was appalled. Arjuna wanted to have nothing to do with it. But that form is actually conjured up to intimidate non-devotees. They don't understand love, but they understand power. They understand force. And in that way, the money that's spent, for instance, in places Okay, Louis the 14th was over the top. Louis, so at this point saying, "True, are you defending Louis the 14th?" Because that was obscene. The no, the number of workmen, the resources, the years it took. Okay, anyway, I'm just telling you what Louis the 14th would have said to justify the expense. However, when we did our little tour, we had a tour guide. I went with Clement Biddle Woods. I ended up in France during the war, Vietnam War years. I had absconded from America, um, deciding not to subject myself to the draft. I sent my draft card to the head of the Selective Service, General Hershey, took part in anti-war protests at the Pentagon, had a couple of arrests. Talk about all this protests nowadays. The times I grew up, there were protests also for different reasons. I think for much better reasons, if you want to know the truth. Um, so I decided that I would leave the country, and I went to Scotland and England. I went to the Canary Islands, and eventually I ended up in France. And there was a couple there who were sympathetic to the anti-war movement, and they were arranging jobs and accommodation for what they call insoumis or draft resistors who were living in France. They were also helping those that would leave the U.S. Army in Germany and come across into France, deserters. And so they took me to France. We went. They had another house. They had a house in Paris on Boulevard Saint Michel, and they had another house in Spetses, which is a Greek island. So I was engaged as a tutor to teach their four boys, Tommy, Jimmy, I forget, English. I had to spend an hour a day to teach them English, and in return, I got to travel all over Europe with them and spend several months in their place in Spetses before I went on to Israel and then to India and so on and so forth. But as we were touring Europe, we came to Versailles, and there was a tour guide who took us behind the palace. We went back, elaborate gardens, all very nicely manicured, shrubs and hedges, private areas. And we went back to an area quite distant from the palace itself. In the palace, the king would dress up, very regally, as imposing as he could. He would dress with jewels and crowns and robes and be surrounded by attendants to strike fear into the heart of visiting emissaries. But when his official duties were over, he would make a beeline. You could just see him heading back to the private area of the gardens, throwing his crown, throwing his scepter, throwing his toga, getting down to his what do they call it? Wife beater t-shirt and shorts, where he would go into a private garden and play badminton or play croquet or maybe even wrestle with some of his intimate friends. And that's where his heart was. You can imagine him being on the throne receiving visitors, and he's thinking, okay, half an hour till I'm off. A half an hour till I'm off. And then as soon as the time comes, he says, okay, no more audience. I'm out of here. And then he can't wait to get back to his special friends where he lets his hair down. So the the Lord who's sitting on the throne, striking fear into the hearts of the non-devotees, who is represented by the universal form, the Vishwarupa, which Arjuna wanted nothing to do with. That's Vishnu. That's Vishnu incarnation. And the one playing croquet or badminton or wrestling, that's Krishna, if you want to know the difference between the two. Take a modern example. You go into a big company, a multinational company like Microsoft, Google, Facebook offices, Apple. Um, so those offices, the real estate that they own, the vast sprawls, wherever in Cupertino or Seattle, or wherever they are, that could be said to be like the Brahman aspect. Vedanti tat tattvam tattvam yasyaram brahmiti paramatmi bhagavaniti abdise. God has three aspects. He has the impersonal aspect. He has the aspect where he dwells within the hearts of all living beings. And then he has his personal aspect, Bhagavan, which is the highest. And so You can also see how powerful men within this material world have those three aspects. You go tour the facilities, the offices, the warehouses of Google, Apple, and Microsoft. That's like the Brahman, the impersonal aspect of Bill Gates and Tim Cook, and Mark Juergensmeyer. They're everywhere. They're everywhere. That person who founded the company and who heads up the company, their personality is everywhere in the design of the offices, the layout of it. The ultimately they have a say in who's hired and who's fired. There's a mission statement on the wall, which they personally crafted with their best advisors. There are products, there are things that are sold. And these are all basically manifestations of the personalities who founded and who head up these companies, just like the Brahman aspect, the impersonal aspect. Effulgence is a representation of the Lord. Then there might be a meeting. Some of the heads of the company, the principals, are called together and they turn on a big monitor on the screen, and there's Tim Cook, there's Bill Gates talking to them through Zoom. They're having a remote meeting. That's like the Paramatma. The Paramatma is reflected on the screen, the monitor of your heart, and he gives you directions he's remote, he's far away, he's in the spiritual world as a Narayan, a Vishnu incarnation, but he's also expanded himself to be right in the office with you, giving you advice and direction. So that Zoom meeting that you're having with the CEO or the founder, that Zoom image could be compared to the Paramatma, the super soul aspect of the Lord. But then one time, the president himself, in his physical manifestation, comes and visits the company. Or maybe you're such a model employee, or maybe they have a particular job for you to found a new branch or start a new product line. So you go to the home of Bill Gates and Tim Cook. You sit down in the living room with them. You shake hands with them. They get to know your name. They know some personal details about you from then on. You're working closely with them. You report only to them. Every 6 months, you have a personal meeting with. That's like the Bhagavan that they invite you. If you're really an intimate, they invite you to 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 play golf with them and their associates. Another example is Virgin Atlantic Airlines, founded by this fellow Branson. So, you have all the planes, you have the terminals, and that's like the impersonal aspect. And then you get on the plane, and then you have a little monitor on the seat in front of you, and Branson, I forget what his first name, comes on and he speaks to you. He speaks to you. He welcomes you to, he thanks you for choosing his airline. He points out the comfort, the safety features. He points out the advantages that his airline has over other airlines. That's like the Paramatma. And then maybe someday you find yourself playing golf with him. Maybe you're a VIP member or a frequent flyer or something, and you actually get as a perk to fly to somewhere in the Caribbean and do a round of golf with Branson. That's like the Bhagavan feature. So Gajendra here in his prayer in the third chapter, third verse of the eighth canto, is surrendering to that personality who is the transcendent beyond those who are transcendent. Param para. He's transcendental to those who are transcendental. Even Vishnu is obliged to govern. Even Vishnu is obliged to sit on the throne. Even Vishnu is obliged to manage the creation, maintenance, and destructions of millions and millions of universes. So to whom do all the demigods up to Vishnu and Shiva answer? And who amongst all of the transcendent beings is free to do whatever he wants? Who amongst all transcendent beings, manifestations of the Godhead, if you will, is not dictated to by any other superior manifestation of Godhead? You see, in the spiritual world, there are categories. There's transcendent, and then there's transcendent, and then there's transcendent. It's not just one, like the Mayavadis would say. It's divided up. It's segregated, it's separated. There are categories of power, there are categories of transcendence. And Vishnu corresponds to that God we read about in the Old Testament, who is a manager. But beyond Vishnu, the power behind millions and millions of Vishnus is that supreme personality of Godhead who is not accountable to anybody. Ramachandra is often described as one half part of Vishnu. Ram was half a part of Vishnu, and Bharat and Lakshman, Satrughna were all um, different fractions less than Ram. So the unique characteristic about the Ramayana is that Ram holds himself in. He doesn't act in a unfettered way like Krishna does. Krishna does whatever he wants. Just read the Krishna book. Krishna does whatever he wants. He says whatever he says, and he doesn't apologize for it. He's not called to task. He's not asked to account for his actions or for his words. But Ramachandra, he follows what's in the books, what is described as duty, what is described as good character in the books, in the scriptures. Ramachandra strictly adheres to that. He walks and comports himself and acts and talks according to what is duty, what is religion, what is righteous, as it is described in the book. So you can always check, like we say, Guru Sadhu Shastra, you can always check that the actions of Ram, the speech of Ram, even the thoughts of Ram uh, resonate exactly according to what we understand as being religiosity and righteousness from the books, the authorized books that we read. But Krishna doesn't bother with that. Krishna does what he wants. He says what he wants. And then he says, you write this as dharma. Krishna takes the ball, so to speak, of prescribed dharma, prescribed duties, as it's written in scriptures, and he drop kicks it. He punts it out of the stadium. He hits it a home run. He does whatever he wants. He doesn't have to follow any rules. He makes the rules. He is Dharma personified. Dharmam tu shakshat bhagavat pradin navai vidurisha nasidu. What makes it legal to drive on the right side of the road and legal on the left side of the road? After all, from a physical point of view, you might as well just flip a coin. One is just as good as the other. But don't make the mistake of thinking that you can pass a law from now on, we all drive on the left side of the road. You don't have the power. You don't have the power. But Krishna is he by whose word everything is righteous. Everything is true. It is by the word of Krishna that the sun rises, the sun sets, the seasons change, the planets revolve. It is simply by the word, by the thought, by the will of Krishna. So Krishna is Dharma. And when we write it down, we're simply writing down what Krishna wants to happen. Because ultimately, there are no such thing as laws. There is only the very, very consistent and determined will of God. That's what we call as gravity. That's what we call as the laws of thermodynamics. That's what we call as quantum physics. It is ultimately, bottom line, you want to reduce everything, it is the consciousness of God. And because he's a person, and a person who's not accountable to anyone, he can change his mind. When Ram wanted to cross the ocean, he changed his mind. Normally, his determination at rocks, when they're put into water, will sink to the bottom. But in this case, Ram needed those rocks to float. And so without any difficulty or any trouble whatsoever, the monkeys and bears wrote Ram's name on the rocks, and the rocks floated. So what we would have called the law of gravity was changed in the blink of an eye by the will of Ram. The law of gravity was suspended when Ram wanted to build a bridge of rocks across the ocean. So everything that's written down, it's not a law that God has to adhere to. When you write something down, it means that just God's been doing this thing consistently for a long enough time. We don't know of any exceptions for it. So then we call it a law. But but it's really just the consciousness of God, which normally is very consistent, very dependable, very reliable. You can count on it. You can write farmers' almanacs predicting the rising and setting of the sun. And yet, at any moment, he can change. He can do something different. He can do whatever he wants. He doesn't have to follow any rules. And that is the secret behind his coming here in the first place. In the Bhagavad Gita, he says, Jo Bishanavyadma Buddharam Pragvidim Shamadishtaya Sambhavami Atmaya. What is the secret? What is the reason behind my appearance? I'm not appearing because being forced by any other higher power. Neither am I assuming a material body, and my form is Krishna. My body, which you see, Arjuna, is a Jobishan Abhyadma. It is unborn, it is eternal, and it is infallible. It is above transcendental nature. Not only is it above even transcendental nature, but is the source of all the transcendentalists like Vishnu and Shiva and Brahma. It is a source of both the material and the spiritual worlds. It all comes from me. At the same time, I don't come from anyone. Every living being having emanated from me depends upon me, but I don't depend on anyone. I am Sutra Managiram. I am that thread behind all of creation. So our practice in chanting and following rituals of purification is not just be enamored by the pearls, by the external manifestation, but to scientifically understand that God himself is the horizontal and vertical thread upon which everything rests. And by serving him in this short lifetime, we can purify our consciousness. And in the end, join as transcendental beings ourselves. We can join that supreme personality who is the highest transcendentalist amongst all transcendentalists, and we can enjoy eternal pastimes of bliss and knowledge in his own abode, following in the footsteps of Srila Prabhupada and other great souls such as Gopal Krishna Maharaj, who went to be with the Lord earlier this week. Om Tat Sat, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Rob has already told us he's got a doctor's appointment today, so we won't have any takeaways from him. But I see Brent has given us a couple of jewels here. Even all the opulence and ceremony of Versailles can't compare to the sweetness of Krishna's intimate pastimes in the spiritual sky. That's great. That's almost word for word. All the attention goes to the pearl, but nobody thinks about the thread. We can spend our lives trying to enjoy the things of the world, or we can serve he who holds it all together instead. I like that. That's really good. All the attention goes to the pearl, but nobody thinks about the thread. We can spend our lives trying to enjoy the things of the world, or we can serve he who holds it all together instead. Well, that was the last 45 minutes in a nutshell. Thank you, Brent. Brent's proved himself over and over again a good listener. While I'm away these next few weekends, Brent's going to be giving the lion's share of the talks here in Spanish Fork on Sunday evening. Ram Kishore, Haribol Spirit Soul, Nam Amrita Das, Brita, Haribol this beautiful morning. It started out dreary like it's been, but it seems to be brightening up a little bit out there. Natasha, Hare Krishna, good to see you again. Okay, that's about it. This has been Wisdom Wednesday. I'll be heading off for Texas. Monday, I'll try to join you, but I'm traveling back from Texas on Monday, and I think I have to catch a plane just about the time this class would have been. So a little doubtful about Monday, but hopefully we'll be back together again on Transcendental Tuesday. And I'll try also do a little live Facebook, some clips from the festival in Sealy, Texas. It's a small town. I don't know how many people will come, but we'll have a good time. And there'll be many, Many nice devotees there, a lot of kirtan, prasadam. Should be enlivening, should be transcendental. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama, Rama